course. Of course. Of course. Shoot, if you don't sit down, for real, sit.
It's funny.
All right, guys. Today is November the 1st. It is a Wednesday. Wednesday. Welcome into the podcast. You've reached ReThink, and my dogs are going crazy. Hold on a second, man. Go. Out. Out. Of course it is. Go.
They,
Go.
do- they be doing that on purpose, yo. I'm convinced.
Go to bed. I think it's somebody like anything that happens outside at the door, like a delivery or somebody walking down the street, they just lose their damn mind. All right, give me a second. Now I am gonna have to edit because all this is on the thing. Okay. All right, guys. Today is November the 1st. It is a Wednesday. Welcome into the podcast. You've reached ReThink. My name is Kelly, and we're ready to rock and roll. If you guys have been following our most recent series entitled "The Power of Words," then you're going to be really excited today. I told you we're going to have a special guest, and we were going to talk about the power of words in relationships. So that's what we're talking about today on the podcast. Welcome aboard. We've got Mr. Elam King, life coach, with us, and we're going to let Elam introduce himself in just a few minutes. I want to get all of our first timers in. I want to get folks who've not necessarily been following the series up to speed before we get started, so that we're all on the same page. If you haven't listened to them, excuse me, it's not necessarily a prerequisite. It'd be just nice to have that you have listened to them before we start today. I'm going to give you a quick summary, and we're going to get going. So 2 shows ago, we did the power, or rather, I should say, the unlocking the power of universal law. It's a journey in belief, expectation, correspondence, and attraction. So what we talked about here were belief, how beliefs establish, and the law of your expectation, correspondence, and law of attraction. If you're not listening to that, please go back and take a listen. We followed that up with the podcast. We talked about the power of words shaping your reality. It's a lot of good information here. Power of your words in your career, in your entrepreneurship, in your personal development. Then, of course, we pick relationships to go a little bit deeper, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, guys, welcome in to the podcast, Mr. Elam King. Elam's been with us before. Elam, welcome in.
What's going on, sir?
Good to have you. It's been a while. Too
Yeah, it's
long.
not too long.
Too long. It's always good to mix it up. I like
Yeah,
to have folks on because a lot of times I'm the one doing the talking. I think my audience likes this. They keep coming back, but I like to have a different perspective and give us a little bit of your background in terms of, I know obviously everything because we work together, but particularly interested in the work that you do with couples and relationships and things like that.
absolutely. Well, first of all, Kelly, I want to thank you for just giving me an opportunity of coming onto your platform. As you were speaking earlier, you were like, okay, did anybody go back, talking about going back and listening? And when I tell you that this particular portion that you're doing about just words and things of that nature, I loved the previous episode. So if anybody hasn't listened, please go back and listen because I think that they were absolutely amazing. But again, Elam B. King. I am originally from New Jersey, but currently located in Atlanta, Georgia. I work with couples, whether they are, I work with couples, I work with singles. I am a three-time author. You can see where my book's at back there, right there. Also recently released a game as well, and from a pre-marriage perspective, and so that's the area I actually really love as well. Let's see here. Who else am I? I am a father, a blended family of six, And so this is a passion of mine to work with
Mhm.
individuals and couples as well. The way I look at it, Kelly, is that, when things happen in these streets, one of the things that people say is that, we need to stick together, we need to do this and we need to do that. And so, but then after a week or two, they're back to their regularly old scheduled program, right?
Yeah.
My thought process is, in order for us to improve our communities, we need to improve our families. And in order for us to improve our families, we have to take a look at the two people who are intricate in producing that family. And so that's what I look to educate and just bring that to the table. This is a labor of love, and super excited. And I just got a little cold on Monday. So if my voice, or if you see me with a halls or something like that, just bear with me.
All right, man. Well, appreciate it. As always, welcome. You're welcome here anytime. I think today, not I think, I got to stop saying it. There's a programming in and of itself. Today is particularly uh, necessary to have someone like Elam on because we get an insight into where we are. Like, really, where are we? I have worked for the large majority of my adult life in some aspect of supporting companies from a statistical standpoint. And I bring that
Mhm,
up because one of the things that I always tell people, you
mhm,
can take yourself out of the equation. What do the numbers say?
right.
You can find the trend, use historical data, what's happening, and you can predict maybe what will happen. Okay, so Elam has a considerable past performance, not only personally but professionally in relationships. So when we start talking about these subjects today, we're actually talking about trends. We're talking about historical data, past performance, things that have actually happened. So particularly for the younger folks in this group, people who are looking to better their relationships. Listen, it doesn't have to be marriage. You could be in a long-term common relationship. You can be in a partnership. You can be or want to be in a long-term marriage. But these sorts of things also work as it relates to your career because it's just people. It's people. And so relationships are relationships. Yes, they're a little different in some regard, but dealing with people in many aspects are very similar. Now, I do want to poke back 1 second because it's good that we kind of line this up. The unlocking the power of beliefs. Okay. In this episode was 3 episodes ago. So when you go back to the podcast, you want to go back to September the 12th. The episode is the Power of Belief series, misconceptions. Misconceptions and how to rethink what you believe. We gave a number of misconceptions in that show, things that people still believe. And we talked about how that affects your ability to accomplish certain tasks. If you still believe things that are not statistically and scientifically true, number one, why did you believe it in the first place? Usually it's because someone who you love, care about, who loves and care about you told you. You didn't vet it and you locked it in to a common thought, which eventually came a belief, and you based decisions in your life off of it. It turns out it's not true. So listen to that episode. We went up a step to October 23rd. We talked about the power of words and shaping your reality. We talked about two very key studies that were done by scientists in this particular episode that discussed the power of words on your environment. In particular, one was water. And I think that's very powerful because your body is made up of a large percentage of water, depending on who you listen to, at least 75%. And if you can change the composition of water by your words, then what are you doing when you speak to yourself, to others, particularly your spouse, partner, and or your children? So today we're going to start from that point. And what I've done is gathered a specialist, and that is Elam, and 10 questions, which are going to come forth about relationships. These are common questions that are asked, have been asked in relationships. Our goal is always solution oriented. So I know my audience doesn't want to concentrate on the problem, Elam. We want to
Mm.
get towards solution. We all understand, or we all see, or have seen what's going on in social media space as it relates to this, you know, war on the sexes, right? How
Man.
How do we how do we navigate around that? Like in Atlanta, everybody's trying not to go through the city. How do we take 285, which goes around that and still gets us to our destination, right? That's what we want to do today. We can see it, we understand it, but we don't want to deal with it. What we want are solutions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose 10 questions. Elam is going to provide us feedback as it relates to his experience, particularly not, verbatim what he's hearing from his folks that he's coaching, but he's going to give us some guidance on some answers here. And what it's going to do is help you to navigate in your relationship. All right. So let's get going. So the first question, what we're going to talk about now, how do words that we use affect the quality and dynamics of our relationship? So again, how do the words that we use affect the quality and the dynamics of our relationships?
So let me share this with you, Kelly. We can actually stop right here because we can go like the next 2 3 hours on just this first
Right,
question, to be
right.
honest with you. Some of these questions are, might have an overlap or whatever when it comes to communication, because uh, you know the number one reason that people come to my door is that I'm finding is communication. It's probably about 80 to 85% of the time when people come to me. I don't care whether they're married 1 year, whether they're 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. That's the number one thing. The top three reasons for divorce: number one is infidelity, number two is financial, and number three is communication. And number three and number one bounce back and forth inside of being the number one and number three reason. But if you really think about it, even infidelity is really a lack of communication that resulted in someone stepping out and doing what should not have been done. And so I share that with individuals because the importance of our communication and how it affects the dynamics of our relationship is everything.
Yeah,
I always like to share that lack of communication creates distance. Distance creates the gap. The enemy lies in the gap. The challenge lies in the gap, and it stays there. And somehow it is negatively impacted, or through counsel and things of that nature, it might become something that's positive, and we learn to close that gap. And
right.
so, when I share with you that is the number one thing, everybody's grown until it's time to communicate. When
Mhm.
it's time to communicate, in my opinion, everybody takes their ball and they go home, and they want the other person to figure out what their ball is, how to bounce it, how to move it around or whatever. And it becomes a disaster. And so Blues Clues really exist only inside of Nickelodeon. It's not in relationships. But sometimes us as adults, we say the word communicate, but we don't really understand the dynamics of that. And so it's the number one reason people come to my table.
Yeah, I can believe that. Um, I I don't know how long, but maybe 15, 18 years or more have began to, and I say begin because the more you learn, the more you realize how little you actually know. So you're always kind of almost at the beginning.
Right.
I think practically that if you develop a rigorous, consistent self practice of improvement, then you can be in a position to not only provide your partner with words of support and alleviate and sort of circumvent a lot of this stuff, but you can also provide yourself with the same thing. Because here's what's happening. Let's just kind of break it down. Here's what's happening, and unfortunately, this happens in a lot of arenas. For example, health. People complain. Many people complain about cost of health care. They complain about how they personally feel,
Hmm.
how their bodies are not where they want them to be in terms of
Hmm.
size, shape, etc. But if you look at their diets, they are, in a matter of speaking,
What?
creating these environments for themselves. They're creating these environments.
Right.
Now, here's what I'll say. Here's what I would say. Because I believe that people are innately good. I really do. I believe that people want similar things. I believe that people are innately good. I believe what happens is people, for a large part, are ignorant as to cause and effect. So if fried chicken and bacon didn't taste so good, you would have less obesity and these sorts of things. Now it's a simplistic view, but my
Right.
point is because food tastes good, people don't correlate the bad results of arthritis, obesity, diabetes with what they eat. If they did, they would change their diet. Now, many people have come to that conclusion. They become what I refer to as more conscious. People who are less conscious tend to live on a lower level, and so things are happening to them. They just don't know what they're doing is the thing. Same in relationships. So when we're talking about words, words have an actual effect. Words carry energy. So the
Right.
example that I used in the last podcast was, has anyone ever hurt your feelings?
Right.
Has anyone ever hurt your feelings? And hurting your feelings does not involve hurling an object like a rock or a brick at you. They hurled
Right.
a word at you. And that word with this energy affected you and it changed the way that you were currently feeling. Maybe
Right.
you were feeling good, now you're feeling bad. Okay. So if you don't understand that words that protrude from your mouth actually are creative, energetic, life forming, life changing, then either you embrace that or you continue to go in the spiral where you're not necessarily affecting anyone but yourself. Does that make any sense? Like
Makes a lot of
I'm
sense.
here, I'm not happy about where I am, but I'm the one that's creating all this. There's a way to get out of it. Now, I said all that to say this. I said all that to say this. So many times I see people wanting better, wanting to do more, but at the end of the day, like you started off with the podcast, people tend to go back into their habits,
Mhm.
what they know. And unfortunately, what we know isn't what is going to take us to that next level. Podcasts like this, books like what Elam has written, and the advice that he's given to the folks that have come to him help us to rethink what it is that we believe we already know. We don't. You have to embrace a new thought. And a new thought is, first of all, perhaps I don't know everything. Perhaps I'm the issue. Perhaps what I'm saying and what I'm doing is actually causing my results, my reality. So as we embark on these questions, I wanted to throw that out just to kind of set deeper the stage of where this is going, because you only you know what you're dealing with, and only you know what you've actually done. But it's up to you to be able to determine what type of conflict resolution am I willing to embrace here? How deep am I ready to go? So the next question, Elam, as I muddy the water a little more, in terms of communication, what role in a relationship does communication play in conflict resolution? Conflict resolution obviously being the key.
So, when we're talking about conflict resolution and people we have to understand, and you kind of talked about it a little bit already, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure there's nothing else that everybody hears is that communication is bigger than just saying communication, right?
Yeah.
There are levels to it that need to exist in order for you to have, whether it's conflict resolution or just have communication inside of a relationship. And so, with that being said, you have to make sure that you're having a communication with yourself, and we'll touch on that in a second. But when it comes to conflict resolution, there are actually 7 steps. That's actually a whole module that I have inside of my pre-marriage course called "Are We Ready Yet?" course.com. People can go to that and take a look at that. That's my online course for all my pre-marriage folks that are looking to engage into marriage, right? And so conflict
Mhm.
resolution is actually a 7 step that a resolution, and it allows you to you're gonna have conflict if you're in a relationship. I don't
Yeah.
care how much you love, I don't care how good the sex is, I don't care what it is, you're gonna, because it's two different brains that are trying to take a walk, and sometimes, you know, it's almost like pushing two wheelchairs at the same time. Like one of them's gonna veer off, right? And so it
Yeah.
just gives you an opportunity of just knowing that you're gonna have the conflict is number one, right? But then also, what's your course of action when you do conflict, right? And so I like to normally give a I don't know, are you a Hunger Games person?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you remember that in the second, I think it was the second Hunger Games, whereas they were in the middle of that island and they were like trying to get to the end of it, get like to the shore or whatever, so that they can
Yep.
kind of like get
Yep.
the. Okay, so I like to always share with couples, and I just ask anybody who's listening right now, if you're with your significant other, you know, or even you can do this by yourself as well, but just close your eyes, right? And imagine it's just you and your significant other in the middle of that island, right? And the goal is for you guys to get from the middle of that island to to the shore, right? And so, with that being said, you know, how you know, so it's just the two of you. So, y'all are a team. All right.
Yeah.
So, step one in conflict resolution is recognizing that you're really on the same team, right? The problem is not each other, the problem is the problem. So, let's
Yeah.
recognize that we're on the same team, and then let's begin to run together to get to the shore, right? And so, if you're going to be running together, so now just imagine if you close your eyes and now act like that you and your spouse are running together, you and your significant other, you're running together, right? So if you're running together and the enemy's coming behind you, you got to do what? Talk, right? So sometimes people clam up. I like to say that, you know, that it's just a complete disconnect sometimes that people have, aka shutdown, right?
Mhm.
And so people just don't want to talk for a couple of days or months or whatever, weeks or whatever. And if you're on the same team and the problem is the problem, and you guys are both running to, because they're trying to get you, the goal is for the enemy to kill you, right? So
Yeah.
your only teammate, I don't care how mad you are at them, that's all you got. So you gotta be a team and you gotta talk, right? Um, and then number three is focusing on your behavior and the personality of that moment, because sometimes we'll get into conversations and then now all of a sudden we're dealing with A is an issue, right? But now all of a sudden you remember last week's B, you remember last month's C, the summer's D problem, right? And so now you've never dealt with A. So now you're off talking about C when y'all jumped off about A. Now A is never satisfied. And guess what? A is coming back around, right? It's
Right.
going to come back because you have not resolved the conflict, right? So you want to deal with that focus and that behavior and that event of that moment, not the person's overall personality, because it's not going to get you anywhere. And that's how people go off into left field. Step four, this one's hard. Hold on, everybody. Listen carefully. Oh my goodness. Right? Not speaking so that you're speaking with more to you're listening. Excuse me. You're listening with more to understand instead of being understood. Right? And so if
Yeah.
you're listening and really paying attention to the person and what they're saying in that moment versus thinking about, oh, what's the next thing I'm going to say, and cut them off and all this and that, listen to the person. Right?
Mhm.
So if we're recognizing we're on the same team, we recognize we have to talk. We're going to deal with this moment right now. We're going to listen. Now that we're going to do that, okay, you know what? Let's identify some points of where we're going to agree and disagree, right? So just like I remember, I used to be a supervisor at a call center, and they used to say the first thing you do is when you pull somebody off the phone, you give them the positives first, right? And then
Yeah.
you give them the challenges, right? So what do you guys agree on in this moment, right? Okay, and now after we deal with that, maybe you don't agree with anything, but hey, let's just start again structure wise, because we're on a team, right? And the
Right.
problem is the problem, not each other. So it's okay to take a moment and say, okay, well, what do we agree on? Okay, now let's go to the next step, which would be what do we disagree on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've listened, and we've now prioritized. Okay, what do we agree on? What do we disagree on? All right, now obviously the problem is not what we agree on. The problem is what we disagree on, right?
Yeah.
So after we look at that, now okay, let's prioritize. What do we disagree on? Right? How can we take a look? Which one's most important? Maybe it's one thing, maybe it's subsets that are in there. Because
Yeah.
one thing, sometimes, and I'll particularly share this with women, you have the ability to multitask better than men do, right? So in your brain, you're thinking that you can deal with three or four things at the same time, but that's why there's a book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti, right? Because men compartmentalize things and we look at things one piece at a time. If you don't like it, Talk to Mother Nature. That's how we're built, right? You can't make us you. We can't make you us, right? So taking a look at that and understanding that you have to take one thing at a time, because ladies, your partner does not have he has a you have the higher probability based upon how your brain was made, that you can recall emotional situations. Sometimes he's
Mhm.
not able to do that. So, and I where am I getting that information from? You can go to The Female Brain, written by Dr. Luann Brizendine. She's a 30-plus-year neuropsychiatrist, and so she broke down the female brain, and it's an amazing book. I think every female and male on the planet should read it. She also wrote The Male Brain as well. So this is how our brains are made.
Right.
That men have a less ability to navigate through emotional situations versus a woman. And so understanding that and looking at what you disagree at, right? And then after that, taking one at a time and finding a resolution for that. Now that's 7 steps to conflict resolution. And
Right.
so instead of just attacking each other, let's attack the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Attack the problem. So a couple of things you said there. One, in terms of listening, what we call it here is active listening.
Hmm.
You, you
Absolutely.
are you are actively listening,
Right.
meaning you're being quiet. You're not preparing your answer. You're actually receiving and digesting what the other person is saying. And so the other part, you know me, I'm a big Disney head, and actually I have on my Pirates of the Caribbean shirt today.
Huh.
Uh, you said was, apropos, because my favorite movie and one of my favorite characters is Jack Sparrow, and he says exactly that. The problem isn't the problem. The problem is how you're thinking about the problem.
Hmm.
And so the perspective is one, but also you said working together. So conflict resolution is going to require you to work with your partner, with your spouse, etc. But now we're going to get into the meat of this. When we start working with each other, none of us have mastered telepathy yet. So we have to use words. What words are you using in your conflict resolution? I have said many times, Elam, here on the show, my only experience is, only perspective is my 26-year marriage, my 30 years with my wife. I always say that one of the things I recommend, highly recommend to people who are looking to be in long term relationships is your ability to use kind words, soft spoken kind words, your ability to compromise, your ability to use kind words are, in my opinion, one of the things that will catapult you into, if that's where you want to go. If that's where you want to go. If you ask me what are the main ingredients of this particular recipe, I'll tell you that's one main ingredient. So having said that, how do the words that we use impact the emotional well-being of our partners in relationships? Because what I've done over the last 2 episodes, I've gone through the effort of scientifically and metaphysically explaining to the audience uh, how words actually impact people. There's no one, absolutely no one, that talks more to you every day than you. The question is, what are you saying to you? Because what you're saying to you is
Mm.
going to impact you. And if it impacts you, it's going to impact someone else. So the reason why we look for private schools and we get upset if someone disciplines our kids outside of our home and these sorts of things, we're trying to, curtail what they're listening to, is because we know the importance of words. Does that correspond in relationships? Do words still matter when we're talking to other adult folks in relationships? So the question again, how do words impact the emotional well-being of partners in relationships?
So again, another hour we could spend on something like this, but I'm going to share this with you. And I am going to come from a scriptural perspective here for myself. I don't know what your listeners happen to follow, but I'm just going to go with what it says in Genesis, right? I think it's like the first verse or two. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So, with that being said, and us being created in His image, right? Our words are who we are, right? And our words are with us, right? And we take that, couple that with just the myriad of different places where it speaks about life and death being in the power of the tongue, right? And even when God created the earth, He did that through words. He spoke things, and then they were created. So our words actually have creation. But let's just take this a step further, because maybe you don't follow the same God that I do. So let me go here and say that Rhonda Byrne, one of the very first books when I actually started breaking into more of a personal development perspective, she has this, her first two books, the first one being The Secret, where she talks about how thoughts are things, right? And
Yep.
so that right there, and making creation of it. And if you haven't seen the movie, go to Netflix or whatever them shows are, and take a look at the importance of that. And I actually started executing so many different things of, even after watching that. And then she also has a book called The Power, right? And all of this is about how much we're speaking to ourselves,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so, it says, "So a man thinketh, so it shall be," right?
James
So,
Allen. Yep.
so after you think it, then it happens, right? No, nothing happens without a thought first, which are the words that you're speaking, as you were saying earlier, to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so, we have to take a look at what is our self-talk, right? And even when we have challenges in that area, maybe we need to stick an audio book in there. Maybe we need to pick up, some pieces of personal development. But when I tell you that your thoughts become things, that is the answer to that entire question right there. Your thoughts become
Yep.
things. So,
Perfect.
and that evolves right into your relationships and what you're creating as well with your words.
Yeah. You without knowing, let me just clue the audience in. Elam and I don't necessarily go over script before we do this. I just want you to understand what's going on and how the universe sets everything up. We didn't go over any of this necessarily before we came to record today. Now, obviously, we prepared from a subject matter standpoint, and he's been provided a list of the questions, but the answers are his and mine or mine. The reason why you hear this synchronicity is because universe has decided to have this conversation today, and it is what it is. Um, the question is, what do you actually believe? Because that's going to change only for you. So life is your perspective, just like my life is my perspective. And it depends upon what I believe. And a belief, if we back it up, let's reverse engineer. A belief is something that you thought multiple times, just a thought, something that you've thought over and over again, it becomes a belief. And after it's a belief, it has wound itself and dug itself into what we refer to as your character. It
Right.
becomes who you are. It becomes who you are. But it all starts with a thought. Now, what are words? Because we don't have telepathy yet, words are simply vessels for our thoughts. And like Elam said, there's nothing in existence, whether it's the mic we're talking in, the laptop we're looking at, the chair we're sitting in. Someone had the thought first.
Yes, sir.
And now it has moved from the spiritual into the physical, right? As above, so below. So, whatever sacred scripture you want to refer to, in many ways, they all say the same thing. Any religion, any religion, whether they differ on, who's the main character, the core correspondent is belief and faith. It's belief and faith. So, if it is true that your words have power, and if it is true that you are made in the likeness of all there is, and I believe it is true, then you are a creator.
Right.
So, what you say really matters. So, if you're in a relationship with a person, then what you say to that person actually matters.
Hey, Kelly, can I throw one thing in there real quickly?
Go ahead.
Let me share with you. This is my first book right here. This is called Understanding a Man, Empowering Women with Tools for Lasting Relationships.
We're gonna put
Thinking
the link in the description too.
And so this book right here, just like to give an example of what you just said of the how thoughts becoming things, this was a thought.
Right.
Someone called me, and her statement to me was, "Elam, you should write a book." And I was just like, "What? Me write a book? I don't." And they were just like, "No." Boom, 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 boom. Kind of ran down a couple of things, and then what did I do? I sat there and thought about it, right? And then I began to take action in that direction. That book was not just here. It started off as a sentence or two that came from a friend, which was a thought that came from her, which she
Yeah,
then gave me the thought, right? So that just speaks towards, and like you said, everything that we see with our eyes was a thought first and then was spoken and
yeah.
worked.
Well, listen, when it comes to
And
relationships,
I, go ahead,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. You sure?
I'll cut you off, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. So what I was going to say is that I think that we don't recognize how if we were able to have the level of emotional intelligence of communication with ourselves first,
Yeah,
that is the prerequisite to a lasting relationship. Because then if you're able to communicate with yourself and you're able to know what your likes and your dislikes are and which direction that you're going in and what your purpose is, and then you can then speak to somebody else and help them to understand who you are, and then give them a chance to sign up for who you are, and then that will allow better communication as you proceed forward. So I think that even in this moment, and I know we're speaking about relationships, and a lot of times people think that that's just a relationship with somebody else. I want to just cut in here really quickly. I'm gonna get over here on the HOV lane and just say, hey, we have to make sure we understand what is the communication with ourselves first, me to
yeah,
me, and then that allows us to have proper communication with somebody else.
100%. And I'll even take it deeper to the point of confusing, offending, and throwing some folks out of the car with this sharp turn. But not only does our relationship with ourselves impact us, but I will go so far as to say that if you can master this, because who are the others? There's only
Right.
one. The others are also you. They're just mirrors of you. You get what you give. They're reflections in this universe. And the reason you resonate with some things and not with others, because more of you is coming from this reflection versus the other place. And once you begin to understand that these others are not different or even separate from you, they are reflections of you. So that's why the self-talk is so important. Now, listen, if that's postgraduate work and we just now
It might be.
got to
It might
college,
be.
that's fine. But at least keep that in your hip pocket. So when you do get ready to graduate, you can go ahead to that next class.
Come on, sir.
So let's talk about this. I don't know personally anyone, parents that is, with kids that would be uh hateful, disingenuous, um, hurtful to their own kid. So they guard what they say to their kids because they're trying to promote the best out of that kid. And even if you don't know what we're talking about here in terms of philosophy and theory, in this method, as a parent, you're practicing it every time you're parenting. You believe obviously what you say to your kid will affect them. So that's why you're watching your words in the first place. Otherwise, you could just be a Navy sailor. You could be a pirate and just go for it. Whatever words come out is fine. But you don't want certain music played around your kids. You don't want certain TV played around your kids. You don't want people to say some things around your kid because you don't want that to influence or have an effect on your kids. So I know to some degree we understand it. I don't know why it necessarily changes when it's an adult, because the power of the spoken word is still the same. So specific words, phrases, are there specific words or phrases that can improve intimacy, let's say, or connection in relationships? Because again, like I said, we know words have power. So what is the effect? Because I really want to, where we're going, Elam, let's just kind of jump to it. We see this in this relationship space, you more than I. But you and I talked a while ago. I just want to be very transparent to the audience.
Mhm.
I've been married for so long, I kind of turned the channel on what's going on in the world of relationships. It doesn't really affect me because I'm not dating. I don't look
Right.
like I'm gonna be, what I'm saying? I don't know that men and women are literally warring against each other in terms of, what's going on in
Who's
relationship
the
spaces.
bigger victim?
Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. So it became apparent to me that perhaps these people are unaware of the power that they possess. And that's the only rational conclusion I can come to. They don't understand that the very thing that they're trying to avoid, they're creating by speaking these sorts of things into existence. So if the words do have power, what can folks say, or I'm sorry, how do the words support and or affirm improvement connections within relationships? Do they really affect the relationship overall? What are some of the experiences that you've seen in counseling partners, marriages, people who are single that looking to be in a long-term relationship? Do folks really understand it, or is there a lack of understanding in terms of their own power as it relates to words and long-term relationship?
So I'm going to answer this two ways. I'm going to say that, the first way that I would see with how words and phrases affect is that some of you might be familiar with the five love languages, right? And so, of course, for the sake of time, we're not going to run through those. But there's five different ways that people give and or receive love, and I'll just go with there's five ways that people receive love. And so one of those is words of affirmation. Well, you're looking at that's my primary is words of affirmation. And so I can
Mhm.
speak from experience of just saying, just like people who are the gifts love language, Christmas is around the corner. Those are the people that you don't want to miss a gift for, right? These people that if you don't buy them something, they're going to think that you don't love them. Elam, gifts is at the bottom of my list, right? So I don't really care about that as much, right? But for words of affirmation, people, words of affirmation, affirming. We are the kudos people. We are the
Yeah,
attaboys people. We are the people who hang on every word of the person that we love. You can
yeah,
call us sensitive. You can call us emotional. You can say whatever you want. We can't help how we were designed on our level of love, right? So, which means that the words that you say to us, they can significantly affect us. So, you saying, Elam, you did a great job today. Now, this is for the ones that I love, right? These are for the people I actually care about. Random
yeah,
person on the street. I'm from New Jersey. People can say anything to me if I don't know you, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, right? But for somebody that I love, you saying Elam, great job versus Elam, is that all? Or that wasn't good. It's gonna affect me differently, right? It could
yeah,
tear me down for the rest. And I'm gonna give a little secret for those of you who are with words of affirmation people. It replays like a record player all day. We can't
yes,
even get it out of our. It's like in a loop. I don't
yeah,
care if we're laughing, crying, eating some good food, whatever you said that morning, and if it hit us hard, positively or negatively, it's replaying. And it will either get us to break through that brick wall, or it might just make us, kind of cower and shun for a moment and be like,
yeah.
And so that's particularly difficult for those who might not be words of affirmation. They might be thinking, oh, well, it wasn't just a big deal. I just said such and such. You got to know who you love. You got to know who
Hey,
you chose to
you,
love.
you you just made me think of something. I'm gonna interrupt you here real quick because you and I
Uh-huh.
talked about this. When I saw this, I think either I don't know if I called you right away. We talked recently, and I said, "Hey, man,"
Mhm.
when we first talked about doing this particular podcast, I said I saw this clip.
Right.
I saw this. I don't even remember what platform it was on or whatever. I'm sure it was on like Instagram or something. I only do like Instagram.
Right.
So it was this lady. I'm so bad because I don't know these actors by name. But I'm gonna
Yeah.
see if I can
I'm
find
gonna
it and at
figure
least
it
put the
out.
link into the maybe I can put the link into the notes or something. But it was so powerful, it moved me. Sometimes I see stuff and I say, okay, that's a good episode for a podcast. That's something good for the audience. And I saw this, and it was a guy. I don't even know what he was about to do, but whatever he was about to do,
Right.
it was big. He was getting dressed to go out and face this thing, this task. I
Oh,
don't
yeah, 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 yeah. I know what you're
remember,
talking. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that
remember
one. Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and
I
this
see the
lady.
face. Oh gosh. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. This woman, I'm assuming it was his wife or girlfriend, partner, whatever. She took this
Man.
man and she said, look at me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
she began to tell him how
Yes.
wonderful and capable and strong and powerful he was. And you could just
Yes.
see in his face, he was just taking it all in. It was like a boxing coach talking to a boxer before the bell rings.
Man.
It was so powerful. And I
It
thought,
was.
my God, if we did relationships like that, this lady knew her power. And she said, you know what? This is hey, listen, she didn't say all this. This is how my perception. This is my man. I want him to succeed. So what can I give to him?
Oh,
What can I give to him? And women and men alike, but I think women, because they're communicative and they're much better communicators in my opinion than we are. You have the power to speak. If you got the power to speak into your children, you do have the power to speak into your mate, into your husband, or into your wife. Listen, I'm not limiting anything here, but the fact is, you can look at another person and say, listen, here's who you are. In case you forgot today, before you go out, you are capable. You're more than capable. You're strong. You're powerful. You are going to kill this. You're going to get this job. You're going to win this new client. You're going to obtain this new contract. And just like Elam said, that word gets into that person's spirit, into that person's
what?
soul, and it becomes
What?
energy. It becomes a thing that they can build on. You
Right.
don't know where that person was before that word that you gave them. You don't know
Right.
where they were mentally, and that could be the one thing that takes them into that level of existence. You never know what's going to catapult you into that next level of your life, and we all need it. Listen, I don't care how good you are, how strong you are, how big you are. We have a tendency as human beings to second guess ourselves, and we always, I don't say always, but most of the times we're prepared for worst case scenario. We tend to find it easy to believe the negative or things that are not so great about ourselves. Matter of fact, you remember we were mentoring kids a couple years ago.
Yes, sir.
I would ask kids, write me a list of things that you don't like about yourself. Oh, they get going. They going. Write me a list of things you like about yourself. And they would stumble. They would find
And
it hard.
yeah,
You
and that
understand what I'm saying?
yeah, that goes with the fact that, of course, what I think is they said about 80 to 85% of our thoughts are negative by nature. By
So
nature.
by nature. So what that means to me is that you've been programmed
Yep.
to believe something that is not true. That's number one. Because whether you know it or not, you're complete. Whether you know it or not, you're perfect. If you're made in the image and the likeness of all there is, how could there be anything other than acceptance? Acceptance. Someone's convinced you that you're not good enough, you're not pretty
Yep.
enough, you're not smart enough, and none of that is actually true. And you cannot ever become the person that you want to be until you accept who you are. So if you're having trouble accepting who you are, you've got negative self-talk, then podcasts like this and the series like this hopefully can help you change it. I went off on this tangent, but I want to go back to this lady because I see her face and I see
Yeah,
this guy's face.
I can see her right now, man. And it was such a when I say it. Okay, so of course I do motivational speaking. I have actually something coming up in Huntsville, December 5th, Manversation. That's just going to be some great talk and just kind of convening the men together, whatever. And so I'm gonna speak for probably about an hour. Let me tell you something. Oh my gosh. I'm that guy that if you say something like that to me before I hit that stage, when
Yeah.
you just go sit in that audience and watch what happens. I am going to be the Holy Spirit going to flow through, the knowledge going to flow through. It's going to be entertaining and educational. I mean, her words were powerful. And I
Yes.
mean, it's man for woman or woman for man, but from a words of affirmation person, just like on each one of those love languages, but particularly rest here on this one, we will do even more. And some people don't understand that. And I want to speak towards that because when I said in the beginning that I'm going to speak from two ways. The first way is I can empathize with and just give you an overstand of how important that the words are because it produces love for us, right? But even if we went to the next part of it is that it's actually a level of accountability that you have to understand that you have if you're choosing to be in a committed relationship. You chose to love this person, and then you also chose to allow yourself to be loved, right? And so, with that being said, if you're choosing to and you're choosing to allow that person to receive your love, you have to understand the accountability in there is that you have to watch what you say. And I
Yeah.
think that to the point of what you were saying earlier, of part of this war of the sexes that's going on right now, it comes down to one word: accountability. And
Mm.
everybody wants to take the ball and pass it and say, well, no, I feel like this because you did that. or I feel like this because you did this. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, where was your mind when they did this or when they did that? Was negative sentiment override coming into your mind, which is something we could talk about? Was it that, how were you looking at this? Accountability is the reason why the ball gets passed. So if we have to recognize that not only some people feel love this way, but we
Yeah.
also have to recognize that even if you're not a love language person, you have an accountability of how you express and how you speak to somebody. And if you don't want to have that accountability, if you want to be like, well, that person shouldn't be so sensitive or whatever, then you probably don't qualify for a committed relationship. You can be in these streets, you can do whatever that you do, whatever, but you just might not qualify for a long-term and a lasting relationship because you don't want to do the level of accountability that it takes to make sure that there is an existing and there's an ongoing and that there's a building of proper levels of communication between you and your significant other.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. I believe that wholeheartedly. I think, there's a level of not only accountability, but I just think people don't know. They just
Oh
don't.
yeah. Now with that, now people, we didn't get this class, but we didn't get the finance class either. We
Yeah,
didn't get the health and wellness class either. We
yeah,
didn't get the relationship class, right?
yeah.
So we've
But
been out here baptism by fire. So you
right,
with, young lady, you're with boyfriend A, and maybe he from these streets, and so he can just take you talking to him any type of way. Okay, y'all break up. Then you get with boyfriend B, right? And boyfriend B might be a little bit more emotionally intelligent, right? So now you
yeah,
say something, and he's kind of like, well, why you say that? And now you're like, well, why are you being so sensitive, right? And it's kind of like, okay, so you're in order for people to communicate, they're going to be sensitive, right? They
yeah,
have to be able to attach themselves and understand what's going on. So if you want him to not be sensitive, what are you tearing down with that in the meantime? You're tearing
right,
down the communication, right?
yeah,
So, and I think that sometimes, moms might do this, dads might do this to their children of just kind of suppressing a child speaking and or having a level of emotion. That's all of that is communication, right? It's all expression, right? And so we have to be accountable as parents because that's a relationship. Parent to child, that's a relationship,
yeah,
right? We have to be cognizant of that at work. Co-workers, that's a relationship, right?
yeah,
Our friends, right? And then and then matters of the heart. So it's a broad spectrum that we have to be able to be accountable to be able to speak and listen and know that no, it's not okay for you just to say anything you want to. That does
right.
not qualify for an
Well,
intimate relationship.
it's not okay from numerous standpoints,
Right.
but we'll take it from just a few. It's not okay because whether you know it or not,
Mm-hmm.
you are a creator.
Yes.
Whether you even believe it or not. Listen, you don't have to understand the vibration of light and the lenses of your eyes to discuss why the sky is blue. Whether you understand it or not, the sky is still blue.
Right.
It's not
Right.
waiting on your understanding. It simply is. So the idea of you not being a creator, it's not subjective. This is objective. You were made in the image and likeness, all there is. So your words actually matter. So the point now is, now that you know that, what words are you using? Primarily to yourself. Elam, you hit the nail on the head. I have a collective of James Allen writings.
Okay.
And one of the books that I love the most, believe it or not, I read this on a cruise. The first time I read it, I took 2 books on a cruise. Don't ask why I'm reading books while I'm on the fun cruise.
I'm
But
an audiobook person myself,
listen, it changed my paradigm. It's
Right.
15, 18 years ago. And one of the books was As a Man Thinketh. And it's important to
Right.
have that paradigm shift because you will go along the way you've been programmed and you're not an individual until, and listen to me carefully, I don't believe you're an individual until you begin to ask why.
Right.
Why do I believe this? Why do I go to this church? Why do we live in this neighborhood? Why do I believe what I believe? Because that is what makes you you. And until you ask why, you are your mom, your dad, your teacher,
Right.
your pastor, your best friend. You are programmed until you begin to determine what it is you actually believe. Okay.
Right.
So when we're talking about relationships, what do you bring into the relationship? You bring in all this baggage. You bring in all these thoughts, all these beliefs. And are you you? Are you a collective of folks that's programmed you and just sent you forward? That's an important distinction. That's something that you've got to determine. Now, listen, we don't have time to talk about all that tonight. My point is this: you listen to a podcast like ReThink. Our purpose is to think old things in new ways. We're heading towards completing our goals, whatever your goals are. And in this case, I'm assuming you're either interested in a long-term relationship or you're currently in one and you want to keep it going. And also, you want to understand the power that you have as it relates to creation, your words. I'm suggesting to you, not just believe what we say, because the only way you're really going to make it real for you is actually do it. I'm going to give you one thing that was suggested to me when I read the book. This is by a guy named Charles Honnell. The book is called The Master Key. Now, there's a lot of legend around this book. This book was supposedly the book that Mr. Bill Gates found while he was in college, dropped out, and bam, Microsoft. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's surrounding the book. What I can tell you, it changed my paradigm. It combined science and religion in a way that no one else has ever been able to do for me. And it changed the way I looked at myself, mostly because I began to understand the power that I have as it relates to my words and who I am as a spirit and energy. So what I'm suggesting to you is this: test out what we're saying and continue to prove to yourself, is this something that I believe? Is this something that's true or not? One of the things that he says to do in this book, I'll just give you one example as it relates to your subconscious, because much of the program is in your subconscious. So your conscious is like the tip of the iceberg, and then the subconscious is like that big old piece that's underneath the water that no one can really see. That's the piece that's really moving you toward, moving you in life. So what he says is, hey, your subconscious mind is very powerful. Let me prove it to you. Tell yourself, talk to yourself, tell yourself, hey, tomorrow morning, I will wake up at 6 o'clock. You can do this tonight. For people who've had alarm clocks and had to set alarm clocks, tell yourself tonight 3 times before you go to sleep. Whatever time you want to wake up, 5:30, 6, it doesn't matter. Tell yourself 3 times before you go to sleep and see what happens.
It
You
really
have,
works, by the way. I
of
gotta
course,
say that.
it works.
Man, this thing, unless I've had a really, really rough night based upon what out kicking or whatever, I'm sorry. That as you were talking, I was like, man, he don't know. I actually use that. I use
Yeah,
that. And
yeah,
it's eerie because you will literally wake up like 3-4 minutes actually before your alarm goes off. I literally
right.
just did it last week. I was headed, I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, man, was headed to my homecoming. And so I had to wake up I had a flight that I had to catch at 7, so I had to wake up at 5:30. So I put the clock at 5:15. I went to bed at 1:30, right? So it's not
Mhm.
like I went to bed at like 8 or 9. Went to bed at 1:30, woke up at like 5:12. And I was just like, all right, let's go. And I haven't done it in a while, but I was obviously super excited to, go out of town. So maybe that added the extra hype. My internal clock, it's scary, man. It's scary how that actually works.
Listen, man, it's only the tip of the iceberg. It's stuff that, like you said, it's not taught in school. You
Right.
know what you know by studying and showing yourself approved. So just use what we're saying today as sort of the catalyst for your research for yourself. That's
Hmm.
important because, like the teacher said in school, you got to show your work. You
Right.
can't just turn in the answers, show your work. What I'm
Right.
telling you works for me may not work for you. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just doesn't work the way that I do it, which is why when you go to these sermons and to these, talks and stuff, when you're trying to replicate what's working for someone else in their life, it's not that what they're telling you isn't true. It's that that's what works for them.
Right.
You figure out what works for you. And what we're suggesting to you is that scientifically, objectively, your words matter. You
Right.
are a creator, and speaking to someone in certain ways matters. Let's say, for example, you are interested in a long-term relationship. What do you think is going to happen if you are constantly negative? What do you think is going to happen to that relationship? Are you going to have the quality relationship that you want? or you're going to see the worst of that other person. A lot of men talk about their wives nagging, et cetera, et cetera. Conversely, what happens if you provide that other person with uplifting, substantial, supportive words? What will happen to that other person? And I'm going to tell you, Elam, I've been married 26 years, 27 this year. 30 years me and my wife been together. The first several years, I know for a fact I wasn't the easiest person to get along with. So God bless my wife. Because I had enough, let's call it ammunition, to blame her for really everything that was going on with me.
Right.
And none of it was true, of course, because of what you
Right.
said before, accountability. But once my paradigm shifted and I began to understand what I was doing was creating my own environment, I changed what I was doing.
Right.
Example, if you are dating someone, if you are married to someone, whether it's 1 year, 10, or 50, this works the same. It's just that folks that are closer to 50 have figured it out.
That's right.
Number one, you will find fault in anyone because none of us are perfect.
That's word.
Number two, you can determine, just like when you were dating, if you think my wife wasn't, let's say, messy when we were dating, you're wrong. She was. It just only mattered to me in the third or fourth year of our marriage. Why? Because I began to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
I overlooked it during the dating process, but I hyper focused on it when it would make my point, right? What I'm telling you is this: focus on the good. You can find fault all day in anyone, including yourself. But what is that going to do for you? Focus on the good, support, increase good energy into your relationship and see the result. I can tell you right now, if I walked into this house, which I've done, and if I'm positive, I'm uplifting, hey, you look so good today. What did you do to your hair? I get a completely different wife. If I come home and I'm not communicating
Grumpy Smurf.
and grumpy, there you go. I get a completely different wife. And my point is the common denominator is me. Is me. So my question to you, to the audience, what do you want? What do you want? If you want peace, if you want contentment, if you want long-term relationships and stuff like that, then you have to play a pivotal part in it. And a lot of that has to do with what you're saying. What are you saying on a consistent basis? What are you saying to yourself? And what are you saying to the other person? So, Elam, we're getting down to the end. I want to ask, I'm going to try to combine these last two questions and see where your thoughts are.
Okay.
Impact. We're talking about it here. I'm setting this one up. Impact of consistent criticism or negativity in a relationship versus the impact of consistent support, of positive speak in a relationship. I think I know the answer to this, but lead us into this conversation when you're dealing with couples that are up against it, in terms of disagreement. How do you lead people into understanding their impact on the relationship, particularly when the words that they're speaking are creating the very environment that they say they don't want?
So I want everybody to go to Google on this one. And again, I guess speaking along the lines of what you said, Kelly, I mean, what I say is Googleable, if you will. I don't just, yeah, of course, some of it is my expertise opinion over the years or whatever, but I try to make sure that I give you some real content of what to go research and whatnot. And so I want to give you guys a phrase, and I want to take a moment, and I really want to talk to those relationships right now that might be in that space, to whereas you're trying to figure out which direction you're going to go in, right? Things aren't looking too good. You got a couple of challenges and you're upset, or you're at your wit's end, right? And so there is a phrase that I want you to Google: negative sentiment override. I said it earlier in our talk tonight, but I just want to make sure that I want you, because I want you to Google that negative sentiment override. And so what is that? So you're in a relationship, and you maybe there's the trust was hurt. Maybe there was something that, there is a consistency of bad behavior that might have come from your significant other. And so now you're in a crossroads. And so maybe that person might be trying to improve. Maybe you guys are working together to improve in your relationship. But every time that the person might say something to you or that they do something, your default becomes, this is a negative situation, or that the person doesn't mean good, or that they're only going to do it for a limited time, they're not going to be consistent or whatever. And
Right.
so when you ask that question of, how impactful something like that is, because the person might really be trying
Yeah.
to improve and to turn a corner. Yes, the unfortunate habit was created. They did what they did. They were wrong for what they do. There's nothing good about what they did. But now they are doing something to take you guys down a path that's going to be more beneficial and benevolent and bring the relationship together. But now you're not giving that person that level of grace that's necessary to navigate through that. And so
Right.
you remain in the negative space. Therefore, even though that person is kicking and screaming under the water, you're just kind of like just gliding along, like, okay, well, you know what, that person, it looks like that person isn't really doing anything, even though underneath they are working as hard as they can to stay
Yeah.
above the surface and move along. And so, when you ask that question, that's the number one thing that pops out. And that's one of the things that I talk about with couples when they, because when people come to me, it's fourth quarter and it's 2 minutes left in the relationship game. Okay. And you're down by 3 touchdowns. Now,
Yeah.
no, and neither one of you are Tom Brady, right?
Right.
So could you win that game? Well, Brady has shown us that it's something that's possible, right?
Right.
But most people are not going to win that game, right? So that's when so you already don't even know what to do, and then by the time you get to me, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, and between one or the other, the man or the woman, that's normally something that's sitting there, negative sentiment. You're not giving the person the grace to
Yeah.
turn the corner, right? And you keep feeding, the person does something nice and you're like, yeah, you liked it. They only gonna do that for like a week or two, and then they're gonna go back to how they used to be, right?
Yeah.
Or they're only doing that just to get in my good graces. Maybe you think that they want to be physically intimate with you. That's why that they're being nice to you tonight or whatever. You can't just say this person's trying to relearn how to love me. This person is trying and getting it wrong. And particularly for anybody, when they are redoing a habit, they're gonna get it wrong,
Yeah.
right? But if the override is not there, if the positive override is not there, and you're allowing the negative override to be there, the person literally does not stand a chance.
Yeah. Well, that example is perfect, because what you described, what I heard was negative self-talk. You have predetermined. It's the analogy I
Absolutely.
use sometimes on the podcast when I say, if you predetermine before you go to a therapist that the therapist can't help me, you might as well not go,
Yes, sir.
because you've already made the determination. You've created it.
Yep.
If you haven't allowed the space, and Elam is saying grace, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. If you haven't allowed the space for change, for better, if you haven't accepted glass half full versus glass half empty, you're going to get what you expect. Hey, how do I know? The law of expectation. We
Come
talked
on.
about this. That's why I said to go back to the other podcast. What does the law say? The law of expectation asserts that what you expect to happen often does,
Yep.
as your expectations can influence your actions and decisions. What does the law mean? How does it work? It serves as a self-fulfilling prophecy. It impacts your behavior and ultimately the outcome. This is science. This is not my opinion. The law of expectation is a thing. Is a thing.
Let,
So if you
let,
don't expect it to get better, it probably won't get better.
and let me add to that. I don't know, those who can see the video, they're gonna kind of see a moment in the past 2 minutes where I was just kind of like, I wanted to jump, because I immediately thought of, honestly, I had a couple last night. True story. couple last night. Really like them. They rocking and rolling, whatever. But there's been a gap in our communication, right? And this is what normally happens when people come to me. People come to me, like I said, fourth quarter. Oh my gosh, the whole house is on fire. And then, through the blessing that God has given me, we're able to guide ourselves onto a good track, right? Might be 3 months, might be 6 months, might be 1 month, right? And then you know what happens? Poof, the couple disappears, right? And guess what? The majority of the time, they come back. Not because I'm just dope like that or whatever case it be, which I'm pretty good. But if they liked what we originally talked about, they end up returning. And why? Because they normally created a habit of what to do wrong. And then they start doing right. And they're like, okay, everything is okay. And they end up dropping back into what was wrong, right? Why am I going there? Because we have to understand that, you have to work towards creating a habit
Yeah.
towards positive thinking, right?
Yep.
Towards walking down a path of doing better, right? And even though that it might be good for a moment, your thoughts might be, you're like, okay, yeah, all my thoughts were positive today. Even in the Bible, it talks about dying daily, right? You have to think, you have to work on this daily, particularly inside of your relationships, because here's the thing: we were given this thing called an imagination. Okay. Our
Yep.
imagination is put there so that we can see ourselves on the canvas of our imagination of where God wants us to go, where we need to go. Right. That's why it was put there. Yeah. And it's so powerful. It's so strong. And I'm going to go here. Right. If you're a man on this planet, right, at some point you were a teenager. I don't have to tell you how powerful your imagination is when you have dreams at night. Okay.
Right.
So that'll show you where you're laying in the bed, but your mind is somewhere totally different, and your morning looks a little different for you. Let's take a
Right.
step further. If you're a human, have you ever been running while you're in your sleep, right? And then you wake up in what? Cold sweat. You weren't running, you were in the bed.
Yeah.
But your mind is so powerful that it makes your body react and
Yeah.
move as if you were running.
Oh yeah.
That tells you how strong your imagination is. And sometimes we can imagine things with our significant others that's really not true, but we will make it be, right? We
Yeah.
will speak it in, we will bring it in because we think that this is what we're thinking is really happening,
Yeah.
right? So we have to be cognizant of that and take a look at that and just know that sometimes that the same tool that we were given to make us great. Hey, people think about being on stage before they're on stage, before they write a book, before they do a podcast, before they go get a job, right? They're thinking
Yeah.
to themselves, I can get this, right? This is why we have vision boards. You see it, you think it, you imagine it. Hey, television is called television because it's telling you their vision. They want you to eventually get to Elam King drinks almond milk right now because of a Super Bowl commercial, right? I
Yeah.
had never drank it before, but I saw them and I imagined myself then like, I might need to drink that. 8, 10 years later, I'm drinking almond milk, right?
Yep.
So I say that to say that we have to understand the power of our minds and that when we're thinking negatively, we're creating, right? And so we have to be intentional on overriding that and putting that more towards a positive space.
Yeah. 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 Completely co-sign. You made me think of a lot of stuff. We could go on and on. And I think what that means to me, obviously, is that we do another segment on this. Deliberate creators is what Abraham Hicks refers to uh, as. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Once you begin to understand who you are, you begin to understand who the other is. And understanding that, you will know that there's really no enemy. There's no weapon formed against you. The reason it can't prosper is because there's really no weapon. You just have to understand it is your perspective of what is. Your life is one thing, your perspective of what is. And you have the ability to change that. You are doing it every day. You self-talk every day. It's actually now an impossibility not to do it.
Right,
You're talking to yourself every day. What
right.
we're trying to get you to understand is, number one, that you're having an effect on yourself. Number two, you can have effect on other people. But number three, if you don't like where you are today, all you got to do is change the way you think. The way you
Speak it.
think will change the words that you speak. The words that you will speak will change the actions of your hand, and the actions of your hands will change your environment. You can be in a completely different place 30 days, 60 days, 90 days from now if you simply change the words and your thoughts that you are thinking on a daily basis. That's really what this series has been about. And I feel like, Elon, we just kind of scratched the surface. So
Mhm.
why don't we do this? Why don't we come back at a later date
Yes, sir.
and we'll check in and we'll talk about it again? Because at the end of the day, the name of this podcast is Rethink. And that's what we do here. So we're always talking about the power of our thoughts and the power of our words. We fashion it a little differently, whether it's career, entrepreneurship, it could be relationships, it could be personal development. To me, all of that flows together because once you can master your personal side of it and you understand who you are, you can begin to understand these other relationships. Anything, Elam, that we haven't talked about? Anything that you want to drop in here before we sign off? I'll just say that I'm gonna have all of Elam's contact information, coaching, etc., in our show notes, and also access to his books. If you want to buy anything or go to his website to check out Elam King, you're going to be able to do that. You simply have to go below to the show notes, and I'll make sure I have everything there.
Well, first of all, Kelly, thank you so much for even being on this platform. Like I said, that first question, we could have gone a whole hour on that. I hope I was able to, add some value of a level of understanding. This is not a 1 hour conversation. This is something that's ongoing because in order for us to maximize the directions as we move forward inside of relationships, communication is number one. And so we have to recognize that we are a part of the problem, but we're also a part of the solution. And so I
Yep.
think that we have to be committed and intentional on seeking ongoing counsel. That's why it says a wise man remains in counsel. It didn't say a wise man remains, a wise man was counseled. No, they
Right.
remain in counseling. And so even this call that we've had today, this show gives us an opportunity of getting some counseling, right? So I appreciate you even having the platform for that. And, anybody, of course, you can follow me on all platforms at Elam B. King and on all, social media platforms. And you can always go to my website at elambking.com. And, there you can see all the different products that we happen to provide to give you that enhancement within your relationship, whether it's a book, whether it is a game, or whether it's that you just need to click on the contact us button and go ahead and shoot me an email. Feel free to shoot me over an email. And if you do that, for those who are listeners of B. Kelly Bennett, what we're going to do for this particular show is that just make sure that you put in there. I'm going to go ahead and do a promo code on there. But just if you happen to send an email, just reference that you listen to the Rethink podcast. And so you're going to get 20% off our regular rates for any type of one-on-one coaching session that we can
Nice.
have. So I'm going to go ahead and offer that to all of your listeners. But again, elambking.com, and you can also follow me on all platforms at Elam B. King.
Nice, nice, nice. Appreciate it, man. Thank you again for being part of the podcast, guys. Thank you all for if you listen all the way through. I know that you've got some good information out, but like I always tell you, listen, you got homework now. I don't want you to believe just wholeheartedly anything that we say. I want you to go now and study and show yourself approved. Vet the information that we've given you. That way it'll stick and stay and you can use it and it'll be effective in your lives. If you are first time listener, guys, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast so you know who we are and where we are. You don't forget, come back each week. We're going to have new content all the time. As a matter of fact, we've had a huge influx in a particular area. A podcast, even we did maybe in the first season that just
Hmm.
really took off the other day, and we
Right.
recorded today to kind of supplement that as well. So, guys, go through the first 2 seasons and any shows that you missed, particularly that on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We rephrased and rethought that and provided you some good, solid ways to deal with conflict when it is personal. How do you deal with listen, the holidays are coming up. I don't know about you, Elam, but when elections were going on here in the US, now listen, we have folks all the way to South Wales, New South Wales, and Australia, Victoria, all the way to the States, Canada, you name it. So people are listening to this podcast across the world. So when
Right.
we had elections here in the US, there were families um, that were broken up during the holidays because They didn't like who the others were voting for. They didn't like who the others were voting for. So what I'm telling you is holidays are coming up, and you may have some sensitive conversations around what's on the news. What's on the news right now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. People are very passionate about this. What do we provide? We're not taking sides. What we try to help you with is how to handle conflict when it's personal, conflict resolution. Really just what we talked about today. What words are you using when you go to your moms and dads for Thanksgiving and these situations come up? How do you discuss it? How do you talk about it? How do you remain neutral? How do you hold your emotions? Go back and listen to that podcast. We're here for you. Thank you guys for listening. We really do appreciate it. Come back, check us out. Make sure you're always checking the show notes. We got a lot of good stuff there for you. Elam, we appreciate it, man. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, man. Another one down.
Yeah, we could have gone a little bit even more on that, but
Yeah,
it's such a wide topic.
Yeah.
Definitely good though.
Once we get kind of in the middle, it's like start taking off. I do have an idea. I'm gonna kind of refine it before I share it with you. I have an idea of what we can do if you're interested, like periodically, just like a check-in where we can just kind of go through this, because we don't want to make it repetitive, but fresh each time. So let me fine tune it and I'll shoot it over to you. But once I get this edited down, man, I'll shoot it over to you, give you the link to YouTube, and you can do whatever you need to do with it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I've done that on a couple of other podcasts, to whereas, just kind of like a check-in or like what's going on out. Even if you want to have it as maybe like, let's just say once a month, you know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
I know you do like, I don't know whether you do every week or whatever, but if you do weekly, we can do once a week. If you do monthly, once a month, because I mean, then whatever, so many different angles. I mean, Valentine's Day is around the corner. That's all people are gonna be talking about is relationships in January and February, right? So it's just that the holidays are coming up, dealing with dealing with relationships during the holidays, and I mean it's as you just said that, it just made my mind go like, oh, okay, well, you know what? Because it's an ongoing topic. There is not just one topic.
Yeah, it's got a lot of layers. So all right, man, I'll let you roll and go grab something to eat. I'm gonna head upstairs and stretch my legs for a minute, and then I'm probably gonna edit this tomorrow and get it going by the end of the week. So
okay,
I'll chat with you, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, man. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Bye.